Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking. Tonight, we're making seared ahi with a modified teriyaki beurre blanc sauce and a couple of other great sauces that are kind of priceless when it comes to enhancing your vegetables. So I'm excited about this session, and I hope you are too. Before we begin, I just want to again go over those Zoom controls. We will not be using the raise hand or the chat to ask questions of Chef Dan. If you do have a question of Chef Dan, please go ahead and put it in the Q&A. If you have a technical question, you can put it in the chat. I'm joined by Dan's lovely wife, Alice Swift, who's a technical genius, and she can help answer some of your technical questions there in the chat. Also, I did forget to introduce myself. I'm Jackie Boland, the Community Outreach Director for AARP Hawaii. And I just really thank all of you for coming tonight. AARP, as you may know, is a membership organization for people 50 and over. And we work to empower those people to choose how they want to live as they age. What we do for everyone. So you do not have to be an AARP member to attend tonight. But we hope that you will use what you learned tonight to help you create a more healthy lifestyle for yourself. Without further ado, I'd like to further ado, two things. One, I sent all of you an email today letting you know that we have loaded up all the videos and all the recipes from the past session, and I gave you the link. I also put that at the beginning of the chat here today. So if you want to access those, either look for my email or be sure to copy that link from the chat before you go. Also, I did send out a one-time opportunity today for you to sign up for all the rest of the cooking classes without having to do them individually. So again, look for that email. That link is too long for me to put in the chat today. All right, without further ado, I'd like to hand the podium over to Chef Daniel Swift.
Thank you, Jackie, much appreciated. Let me switch my camera on here, make sure we're good to go. All right, can you see me? And hear me? Okay.
Yes, you're coming through great. Thank you.
This is my mouse. I'll move it out of the way. You may have seen that earlier, rolling around. Well, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I sort of had last week off. I was here, but thanks to everyone also that joined Chef Dale Thomas for the prime rib class. So that was great. I had a really nice dinner at the end of that class, and I didn't really have to work that much. So that was nice. And then tonight, this is inspired by Jackie Boland, who makes a variation of this, I think, pretty regularly at home. And I wanted to just sort of deconstruct some of the elements that go into it. Most of your restaurants in Hawaii, certainly, and even outside of Hawaii, will sell seared ahi, either as an appetizer, sometimes as a salad, in a steak form, maybe as an entree. Even in a sandwich, you might find that. But the tuna is one of the stars of the show tonight, but it's really, really simple to deal with. And I'll show you a couple techniques with that. But what we want to focus on tonight is like emulsified beurre blanc, basically, and melted butter. I'm going to show you the trick behind that, which is probably next to hollandaise, the most challenging sauce for most people to make. But it can be made really, really easy, and it doesn't have to be complex. So I'll get an opportunity to show you guys that this evening. So the first thing I want to do is take a look at the tuna that we have. And I just picked this up at Times yesterday. It's a little expensive. It's like $16 a pound. So I got 1 pound. The recipe I think that I sent out is generally for 4 people, and I had it set for about 2 pounds. But it's up to you, and it depends on your portion sizes, exactly what you're looking for. So I rather than cutting steaks, I trim the top, which I can sort of use as a steak, this little flat piece here. The small trim off the top, I'll actually put in the marinade with that. Normally, I would just eat that while I'm doing my prep, but I saved it to show you guys this evening. And then I did 2 blocks, which are sort of the tradition or the traditional shape that you'll see for most of the appetizers and the entrees or salads that we see sliced and fanned out. So very, very simple. And then what I have here for the marinade And we've talked about it before, so, but I do like to reiterate and come back to techniques that we talk about so that we can reinforce that learning. Here are the ingredients for a marinade. Marinade differs from a marinade, from marinating in that this is an act, this is a verb. That's what we're doing with the marinade that we make. So super simple. I have soy sauce here. You can get the low sodium one if you want. If you don't get low sodium, I always add water. And we don't have the low sodium one in the kitchen. So I'm always adding a little bit of water so it's not too salty. You don't want it to be too strong. I have a little minced garlic. I have a little teeny bit of sugar, about a half a teaspoon. I have my ginger that I just cut into slivers so that I can fish it out. It'll give the flavor, but it won't necessarily be stuck on the fish. Now you could grate it if you wanted to. If you wanted more ginger flavor, that would be fine. And then because we're doing beurre blanc, I have shallots, so I just took a couple shallots and sliced them up. And then I have a little teeny bit of sesame oil I wanted to add in there. And then those items just need to be stirred together. Very simple. The sugar is really the only thing that sort of needs to dissolve. Other than that, everything comes together well. Now this can be made in advance and let those flavors come out more in the marinade before you throw your fish in there. Or this works also for chicken. Any number of items can be marinated. Tonight, I'm just going to drop in the steak and the small little piece. Now, keep in mind, if you're working with smaller, thinner pieces, they're going to marinate a lot quicker than a thicker piece. So tonight, it's only a 30-minute program, so I'll flip this in a few minutes and come back to it. And we won't give it the hour to 2 hours that I would probably normally give it if I were making this in a restaurant or at home. And then if there's questions, Jackie, feel free to.
There is one question,
Yes.
Dan, which is, can you use frozen ahi?
Yeah, of course. I mean, ideally you try to utilize fresh if you can, but the only thing you're going to notice with frozen ahi or any frozen protein at all, even vegetables, the moisture in the cells just expands when it's frozen, and then when it thaws out, it shrinks, and you get some leaching of water or blood or juice from the products you're working with. So just make sure you towel dry it so you don't dilute the marinade. Or in the case here where we're going with the dry rub, the second version, you don't want a bunch of water running out. So yeah, absolutely. And then more common than a marinade, we'll make sure when we take this out of the marinade that we dry it so we don't go into a pan and get splatter all over the place. We don't have to use oil, but if you do, and there's moisture there, then you're going to have that splatter and that mess. But more traditionally, we'd just do a dry rub. And here I just have one of the uwala leaf rubs. It's seasoned salt, and actually this is like a Cajun spice. So I'm just rolling the block in that. I'm going to do both of these this way. And it can be anything you want. It doesn't have to be Cajun spice. It could be furikake. I mean, we've all tried the sandwiches or the different items in restaurants that we see on the outside of the tuna. So it's really, the sky's the limit on the types of things that you can use. You just have to remember when we go to cooking it, we're going to be using some pretty high heat, so we don't want to burn it. So you do have to be a little bit careful in some of the items that you select. So for example, if you were doing furikake with the small bits of nori in it, you would do that on a thinner cut of tuna so that you don't have to cook it as long and you're less apt to burn it. So then you can reduce your temperature on your skillet a little bit. And then this I can just set aside. This will be ready to cook. Actually, it could be cooked right now, but I want to show you a couple other things before we get to that cooking process. I'm just going to slide it up here.
So Dan, you did not put the marinade recipe in with the recipes, so people are asking about it. Can you just repeat what you put in that?
Yeah, what I put on the recipe was just to select a marinade or your most convenient one that might be pre-made. But yeah, what we have in here is just soy sauce, ginger, garlic, shallots, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of sesame oil, and water. So there are literally hundreds of recipes for a teriyaki style marinade. You could actually almost drop it straight into your favorite soy sauce or low sodium soy, and it'll impart some flavor in that. So anything else that you add to it is sort of the things that you like. Maybe you don't like garlic, so you take that out. Maybe you don't like ginger, you don't add that. Whatever you'd like to put in there, you could. Sliced green onions would be good. You name it. You can put whatever you want in there and get those flavors to impart into the tuna itself. So good question. And I did just flip it a little on the early side. So I'm hoping everyone can see the burners over here. I only see the front camera screen. Is it showing the overhead? So
Yes.
This is to me, the key, right? So if you take nothing away from tonight, the tuna is really pretty easy, straightforward. You can eat it raw with nothing all the way to wherever your imagination takes you. So there's almost no way to really ruin tuna unless you cook it all the way. For me, it just gets dry. We want to try to keep it on the rare.
If it's brown in the middle, it's no good.
Yeah, then just make tuna salad or tuna casserole. That works great. But the process for a beurre blanc is basically creating an emulsified butter sauce. And what I put here on this tray is melted butter. I want to show you melted butter really quick because it is sort of the base for what we're doing with this other sauce. It's just a little bit more complex, a little bit more ingredients, but the technique is exactly the same. So there's really two ingredients. It's butter and water. And if you're melting butter, you're just simply putting your water in your skillet. And we've got our butter here. I use it chilled. You may see some recipes that call for your butter to be room temperature, but I like to work with it when it's cold and chilled. It helps me control the heat a little bit better and make sure that I don't melt the butter too quickly. And this is what it will look like when we're done. So in this, container, it's this liquefied, creamy butter. And all this is pure butter and that little bit of water that we started with. So this one's already ready. You can see it coming up. We don't want it to get crazy burning. We just need it to be simmering, and we'll see a little bit of boiling, and then I can just start adding my chunks of butter. And for this, you can use a whisk. I think in the recipe, I put that you can use a whisk, but you can also just shake your pan a little bit. The key is to make sure as we're melting the butter that we're not allowing it to set. We want it to melt slowly. That's okay. Don't do that. Oh, you can't see. Oh, move the vinegar. Oh, I'll move that out. Okay, sorry. Is it not showing up with this camera here? Oh, okay. Sorry. For the Facebook folks, they can only see the forward one. So you can see I'm just sort of keeping this moving, making sure that it doesn't melt. Because if you've ever melted butter, you know that it'll separate out. Actually, there's one on the stove, Alice. Do you want to go grab that for me in the back? You'll see a container like this, melted butter. So I don't want to walk away from it on the heat like this and not be stirring it. Because what'll happen is that butter will separate. Because butter is an emulsion of usually 80 to 85%, maybe 86 on the high end of butter fat. And then there's 15%, up to 15% liquid. And then you have the whey or the solids that would be in there. Perfect, I'll take it. Thank you. And if you've ever melted butter straight, then you'll see that it separates out like that. And we don't want that. We just want to keep this gently moving, adding the last bit of butter. And as it melts, it will stay together. So I have the temperature on very low. Some people will turn it off, but you have to kind of go back to the heat a little bit if you're using cold butter especially.
Dan, can I ask you a question about this?
Yeah, of course.
So in Julia Child's recipe, you first are reducing vinegar around some onions until it's like basically a tablespoon, and then you're adding the butter. And I was wondering, it looks to me like you're melting the butter first. Does it matter what order you do things in?
Well, that's a beurre blanc. We'll get to that next. This is just melted butter.
Oh, just okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Yeah, this is sort of the precursor to it. So before we move on to the fancy
got it
butter, I want to just show you the process. And this is easy to practice. It works just as well with Smart Balance or something else, but you can see how this is staying creamy. And when it's done, it'll be just like this. And what we do more often than not in a restaurant, this can then be used for your saute station. So you don't have the pure melted fat of clarified butter. You have the melted butter, and oftentimes I will add about equal parts olive oil to the melted butter like this. And then that's what I'll use to warm and saute my vegetables. So this.
And people are asking about water, how much water you're putting in.
Yeah, I think for this one, I had about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons. It's up to you. Believe it or not, you could have about maybe 3 ounces of water. You could put 5 pounds of butter into it. So you don't need very much at all, just a tiny little bit. And then when you're done, you end up with this creamy, nice, emulsified melted butter. Now this will stay stable at room temperature. It will
Could you put that in front of your close-up camera?
Yeah, of course. Let me turn the burner off. And you can see this one's been sitting in the air conditioning, so it's a little firmer. But you can see here, this is nice and creamy and emulsified. So I just wanted to show that because that's sort of the base for the process that we're going into next. And then that can be poured into a container and stored for whatever it is that you want to use it for. Now, obviously, that's butter, and we're fast, healthy, and oh no, so we're not using. Well, it's up to you, actually. I mean, obviously, there's a benefit in terms of the saturated fat when you eliminate it and go with a margarine or something. You're still getting the calories, the fat calories, a little bit less in most of your hydrogenated vegetable oils, but you know, maybe you try it half and half or whatever. It just depends on the diet or what you're trying to achieve in the foods that you cook. But what's really important is that you understand that it's, you know, you just have to monitor it. You have to keep it moving. If you were to walk away and just let those cubes of butter sit there, they would melt out and separate just like the butter here. And if you're able to see up close on this one, you've got those milk liquids in the bottom, the 85% fat, and then the whey on the top. And we've all had clarified butter, probably with crab legs or things like that. And they just remove the liquid and they remove the whey, and you just get the fat. So this is a way to do it and just make sure everything stays together. So it increases your yield. And there's a couple other advantages, like I said, to the room temperature, sauteing and using it for other things like that. The margarine or something. So yeah, if there's other questions, Jackie, feel free.
Sure. Well, it's Marianne wanted to know, sometimes a garlic clove has a sprout growing in it. Does it alter the taste of the garlic? Can you still use it? You can still use it, of course. It's ready to plant. You know, you just take it out in your yard and pop that out and stick it in the ground and you'll start growing garlic. Same with the onions. All of those will end up with sprouts if you keep them long enough, but there's nothing wrong with them. And do you want to hold for and wait for questions on the Beurre Blanc until you show how to make it?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Let me just throw this.
We don't have any others. Yep.
Yeah, we'll just throw this balsamic syrup in. I wanted to show another reduction. I think Jackie likes this. Is that right, Jackie? Do you use balsamic reduction?
Yes, I only learned how to make it in the last year, and it is such a game changer for vegetables. Yeah. I think it's amazing.
Yeah, and this particular vinegar, I don't even know where it came from, honestly. It was just showed up in the kitchen. And it's already a little thick. This one's aged. So if you've had balsamic syrup, then you know it's obviously thick like a syrup. If it's made traditionally, it goes from cast to cast to cast and slowly evaporates over time and thickens naturally. I'm showing you a technique to kind of expedite the process a little bit. So I have a pan on the back, and then I took a little bit of this balsamic, and I was really surprised to see how thick it is. You can see that with the spoon, how it's coating it. This is not going to need a lot of reduction at all. And it's got a slight sweetness to it already. But I do this technique with all kinds of vinegars, actually, and add different things to flavor them. So a little bit of vinegar, a cup or so, with a teaspoon of sugar in a pan, and you just let it reduce until it's the consistency you need for a syrup. So that will probably take a few minutes. The hard thing with balsamic is that you can't tell if it's burnt. So you've really got to watch it. If you look at it, obviously it's dark. Whereas if it was a champagne vinegar, white vinegar, or some other lighter colored vinegar, you can tell by sight. But with this particular one, you have to go by taste and just keep your eye on it.
It's so amazing. I'm doing a testimonial. It's amazing.
And I have a tiny bit of sugar. This one's already sweet, but I'm going to add a little bit. Now keep in mind, this is really important if you're doing reductions, whether it's sauces or syrups and things like that. Now your sugar, your salt, those will not dissolve. So you may put in a teaspoon of sugar and you start to reduce your sauce, and it goes from 1 cup liquid to a ½ cup liquid. There's still a teaspoon of sugar in there. It doesn't evaporate. And if you were to cook it all the way down, the more you go down, the more evaporation you have, the more liquid you remove, the more sweet the sauce will be, because you're not going to lose the sweetness. The same thing with salt. So you always want to be a little bit careful, like not basing your taste on the sauce prior to reduction. But you also want.
So Dan, let me just clarify that. So let's say I wanted to have a cup of the sauce at the end. How much balsamic would I put in, and how much sugar would I put in?
That's a great question. I never go more than like a teaspoon of sugar, because you don't need a lot unless you're doing a giant batch. Even for a large container like this, we probably only had 2 teaspoons in it, because it stays there and it adds that sweetness, and the vinegar will sweeten itself a little bit as it reduces. So this one being thicker than the usual one, like the one you buy at Costco, is much thinner than this. So you have to kind of go by sight. I would say, as a rough guide, 50% reduction for your standard wet vinegars. This one, I don't think it's going to need 50%. I could almost use it as a syrup as it was right out of the bottle. But I'm going to reduce it a little bit, and we'll see where it goes.
So if I want a cup, then I basically put 2 cups in, but I don't have to reduce the sugar because the sugar doesn't evaporate.
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you moved into really large batches, then you might up the sugar a little bit, but probably not necessary.
And one of our participants is just asking what the heat level is for the balsamic reduction.
Always go medium low. You can see, I hope here, and I'm on portable burners, so it just depends. You want to see a little reduction taking place. You can see it boiling, and that means that steam is forming and liquid is evaporating. So
it could take 20 minutes to reduce the Costco balsamic.
Yeah. So medium to low. You don't want to go high unless you're rushing it, and open the windows at home, because if you're cooking down vinegar, it'll aerate the house a little bit. I love the smell of the balsamic, but if it's a distilled white or something with tarragon, my wife doesn't like that. She's shaking her head over here looking at me.
And Linda's just asking for that butter that you did earlier. What you said to store it, but where?
This would be stored at room temperature. I mean, you'll probably only be making the mounted butter if you had an event where you were like tossing your vegetables and things with it. I just wanted to show the technique before we got into the beurre blanc.
Got it.
And then I'm going to start the pan to heat up for the beurre blanc. And what I did was just went with like a really simple modified beurre blanc. So I put on the recipe to choose your favorite teriyaki style sauce or whatnot. I was experimenting with this, and then we can just simply mount the butter into that. So what I have is Thai chili sauce, and this is, I don't know, it's super popular in Hawaii. We call it like the seventh mother sauce because so many places use it. And I just need to put that in my pan and warm it up a little bit. It has everything I need in it with the chilies. It's got a little bit of the sugar. It's got some acidity to it and all of those things. All I'm going to do then is mount it with some of the smart balance to reduce the saturated fat content, but still get the creaminess. And it's like a mock beurre blanc, right? So if you're traditional French style cooking or a French chef, he'd probably give me a backhand for something like this. But we want to be able to create healthier versions of some of the delicious classic dishes that we're familiar with.
Is your balsamic burning right now?
No, I can tell by the bubbles it's not burning, but it's definitely bubbling. So I'm going to give it like another minute, maybe 2, and then I'll shut it off. It'll be done. So all I've got for the pan with the Thai chili sauce is the, I think it's 1 stick, equivalent of 1 stick of butter. And that's what I'm going to mount that with. And I also have a little bit of cilantro that I'll throw in at the end. But I want to show you the ingredients while that's heating up to a classic beurre blanc. And this is why we can't really feature it on Fast, Healthy, and Ono, because it's butter, heavy cream, usually a white wine that's acidic, or sometimes they add some vinegar, but that's what we would use for that, and some minced shallot. So this is the recipe you were talking about, Jackie, where you have the minced shallot in the wine or the wine vinegar, and oftentimes cream to stabilize, and then butter. So that makes a delicious sauce, but we're not allowed to have that on the show. Although it's one of my favorites. I do love it. You can see this one is already hot. I'm going to kill the heat, I'm guessing, because this melts a little bit easier than the chilled butter. And I think there's some air incorporated into it, so that assists in that. So I'm just going to gently stir this in while I shut off the balsamic. I can remove that. And I can see it's liquid. There's still enough liquid in there, so it's not burnt. If you were swirling and it wasn't moving, then you'd know you're in trouble. What you can do if you overcook it a little bit, but it's not burnt to where you can't use it, you can just quickly add a little bit of water and bring that hydration level back up. And then in goes the smart balance. And you can see this little bit that I had right there is already melting, which we don't want. We want to keep it creamy. So again, it has to stay moving. And I was surprised that this worked so well, because we tend to just use butter. But it is a way to almost eliminate your saturated fats, not fully, but definitely reducing about 80%, and get a good flavor. So there's lots of different butter flavored spreads out there. Like I said, I think earlier, this one has a little bit of olive oil in it. And you can see how it melts so much more quickly, because this was chilled also. But it melts so much faster than the straight cubed butter. And it creates that nice shiny sauce as well. And then I'm just going to throw in some chopped cilantro, which I love. And it can be any herb. It doesn't have to be this. Green onions would be great, chives, any kind of herb. And if you joined us for the herb class that we did a few weeks ago, I would stick with the salad style herb, the nice light, leafy, fresh ones. I probably wouldn't do rosemary. Thyme might be okay, but a lot of the sage and the heavy ones might not go as well as you want with the tuna. And that tastes pretty good. Surprisingly good. And I'm just going to set that there because that sauce is done. And then I just need to do a quick check on this. Once it's done, you can get it right out of the pan. And I'm just going to pour it back into the vessel. And all we did here was add that little bit of sugar. And reduced the moisture content. And you can see how thick it is. It's sort of sticking to the pan. And remember that this is still warm, so it's going to get thicker as it cools. So if it's this thick while it's hot, it's going to be even thicker when it cools. So that's about the consistency we're looking for. And if you want to test it while you're cooking it, you can just spoon a little bit out and put it on a plate, let it cool, and then taste it and see if it's where you need it to be. All right, so we can just set that there. And then the last thing we need to do is our tuna. And then we get ready to plate. And here we want high heat. So I'm turning this on. I'm going to give that a minute or so to heat up. That gives me enough time to take my marinating tuna. And keep in mind, normally you let this go a little bit longer. It's not quite as long as you would do it if you had time at home. And I'm just going to take it out. I'll turn it one more time. On the recipe I put, you can put it in a Ziploc bag and take the air out of it, so then you don't have to worry about turning it. And I want to make sure that I get all that moisture off. And then one thing I'll always do is, I'll put another towel on top and I'll let that absorb that extra liquid for a moment. And then I try to use my marinades if I can for other things. This could easily be put into a pan, brought to a boil. Any juices from the fish, or even if you're marinating chicken, would be cooked off. It might form a foam on the top, which you can skim off. And then you can strain it and cool it, and you'll have a teriyaki style sauce. You could even thicken it, but it's really a waste if you were to just throw a little bit of fish in here or some chicken and marinate it and then throw the marinade away when you're done. So this can be used. Don't throw it away, or don't be afraid to try to use it, but you do need to bring it to a boil to cook any of the blood that's in there and then cool it back down, and it'd be good to store. Okay, and this is heating up nicely. And I've got the two types of tuna then. So the one that was marinated briefly. There's a little piece in there somewhere hiding. So I want to make sure that it's nice and dry. That little piece will cook super fast.
And can you explain why you want to get the moisture off?
Yeah, because it'll splatter, especially if you're doing any oil. I have a nonstick pan, and if you're using a nonstick, I would recommend that for searing and things like this, because then we don't need any additional oil. If you were using a regular pan, you would probably need some oil. I would recommend like a olive oil spray or some of the really nice ones that they have today. But if there were oil in the pan and you're adding the liquid, it will pop and splatter just like anything else that you're cooking with liquid and fat coming together.
And is that what you put in? What did you put in the pan before you put the fish in?
I haven't put it in yet, and I don't really have to put anything. What I can do is lightly spray it if I want to. And then in goes the fish. And I can do all of these together, actually. This tuna. That would be more of a steak. Now, remember, this little one's going to cook super fast. So I'll drop it in. And then the ones that had the dry rub can just simply be placed here. I'll try not to get them to touch. And sometimes, folks will even lightly spray the tuna, so you don't have to worry about it or have an issue if you were to flip it. But you can see this little piece, basically probably 30 seconds on each side, and it's going to be done. That's very, very close. That'll be the one that I taste test. And what we can do with the sauce, usually it's swimming in the sauce. It's up to you. I'm going to set that on the board. I'm going to turn this one. I'm going to turn this one. And we have 4 turns on the blocks. This one will only be 2. And then we have the pan sauce, our modified beurre blanc that we can put down. And then I'm going to turn these again. It does not take long at all. If your pan's nice and hot, you just quick sear, 30 seconds on each of those sides, and it'll be done. It'll stay pretty much rare. I might want to flip this a couple times just so I can even it out, but I still want to keep that pretty rare on the inside. If I were to look at this, I should be able to slice it and see how quickly that cooked. That was just like less than a minute, and it's still close to being done. Overdone, actually. Okay. I'm gonna put that one more time. Because honestly, this could be served raw. We just want a little bit of char, gives that little extra flavor. I also have a little slaw here that I could do. It's popular sometimes to serve that. That can get tossed, but I want to make sure that I get my tuna out before it's overcooked. And let it rest. And it doesn't have to rest in the traditional sense like you would for a steak or something. But what you want to do is be able to hold it while you slice it so that you don't burn your fingers. So you might give it a minute to cool down. Matter of fact, this can actually be served chilled. Oftentimes it is. If it were served with a salad or a slaw like this, it would be or could be chilled after it's seared. It can go in the refrigerator. That rice, Alice. And I just need to mix this salad. Oh, just a cup that's inside. And this is just some slaw that we cut. Yeah, just fill the bowl full. And some carrots, a little bit of cilantro, a little bit of peppers, red and yellow. And then I did a little bit of miso dressing. So that gives us a nice colorful salad that we can use to plate. We'll do two different styles here. And I like the crispness of the cabbage slaw with it. And there's almost nothing that doesn't go well with seared tuna. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Were there any other questions, Jackie, or?
Yes, absolutely. There are several. So I just go for it.
Yeah, I'm going to just plate like the steak more of as an entree. So you can see if this were here and on top, it's a lightly dressed slaw. And then I can come back and do the beurre blanc over the top.
And do you think you can put that tuna that's on your little plate there? Can you put it under your close-up so they can see what the doneness of it is? Just really like turn it so they can see the middle that you've cut.
Yeah, absolutely.
There we go.
And then I'll slice this one next. So this one's simple. That's basically done. I could put in a couple.
Okay, so Anonymous would like to know, is the butter salted? And I'm assuming that's for your butter, your earlier butter sauce.
That is a great question. And this is salted. If it were not salted, I would have salt in the recipe. Now, if you are watching your sodium intake, you don't have to obviously use salt. You can eliminate it. And you're obviously not going to have the same flavor, but it'll be very close and still very delicious.
So somebody told me last week that the reason to use unsalted butter is just so that you can control how much salt is in things. Would you agree with that? I would agree with that. Outside of the street department, you really don't see unsalted butter often. It can tend to end up on the table in the restaurant. And if you've ever spread unsalted butter on bread or
or anything other than cooking with it, it's just not that pleasant. It has a good flavor, but the salt honestly makes a huge difference in the palatability of butter when you're eating it straight, like on bread or toast or things like that.
I would 100% agree. Cindy would like to know, for your Beurre Blanc, you can use water or the sauce. Can you use a very thick balsamic vinegar?
You could mount, but yeah, we're deviating a little bit, and I am as well with this. I mean, as I said before, a traditional European chef would probably smack me upside the head for this version of it. But you could mount butter into a balsamic vinegar, no problem. I'm not sure that might actually be good if I think about it, and then use it in as a sauce. But what we can do here is, like the one that we've made, this is oftentimes drizzled afterwards. So I could come back, I put a little black sesame seeds on this and a little bit of the green onion, but I can serve it. I'll just set it here so you guys can see a nice light. So you get the contrast in textures and flavors. You got hot tuna on the outside, but it's cold on the inside. And then the cold salad and the crunch of the slaw comes out really, really nice.
And then just to clarify, Dan, so if you were to make it the Beurre Blanc with the full butter, you would only put about a tablespoon of that on your fish, right? It wouldn't be swimming in it, would it? Or would it?
Traditionally, the sauce that goes on the plate in a restaurant is 3 ounces. So you would have a little bit more than you're talking about it, but it's up to you at home. You can decide what amount you use on your fish. It doesn't have to be a lot. This, I probably have about 3 ounces swimming in the bottom, which will be enough for these 2. And I'm just slicing this tuna. I'll put a piece up here so it's easier to see on the block. And then yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, John was just wondering, what's in the green carton? And I think it's the Healthy Balance butter substitute.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's Smart Balance.
Or Smart Balance, okay. Deb and Greg would like to know, how long can you save the marinade? And how long will it keep?
The one that you've marinated in and then turned around and boiled, strained and cooled, you could keep for probably a week in the refrigerator, no problem.
Okay, and then Judy would like to know, what do you use the reduction for?
The balsamic, I'm going to drizzle it on this when we're finished here. So I'm just going to transfer the tuna. And this would be more of an appetizer style. You could have a side of rice with it. I cooked some of our 8-grain sprouted grain rice to go with it. For the green onions, in this case, maybe I would come back and just do some rings or cut it on a julienne bias.
Okay, and Eric is saying, would you be offended if she wanted to cook the ahi all the way through? And I'm saying it would be a waste of money, but it's up to you.
Yep, I would not be offended. Everyone's different. If I go back to Idaho and visit my family, my sister-in-law won't even allow me to feed like salmon skin to her dog. She's like totally grossed out by it. And the dog wants it. But, so there's no wrong answer. It's totally up to you. And then I've got, some sesame seeds here. These are garlic ones. They make all these flavored ones now, wasabi, garlic, all these different ones. So you don't want to go too crazy, but more often than not, you'll see a little bit of a garnish there. So I just did the green onions. And then I could come back with a little bit of the balsamic syrup for color. And then you end up with something that, let me move this so you guys can see a little better. Although Facebook, I guess, can't see that one.
Oh, that's beautiful. Also, when I do the balsamic reduction, I like to put it on roasted vegetables. It's so good.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing. I see I've gone over time a little bit. I apologize, but
you're right on time. You're good.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that you understand or at least get the foundational concept of emulsified butter sauces. So what we did here with the beurre blanc is not unlike what we did with mayo or hollandaise sauce. It's just a different fat in the terms of the egg yolk and the clarified butter. So we're just using for hollandaise sauce this middle portion, the yellow portion of the fat. There's different tips and tricks to keep your emulsions together. And that's really one of the things that I wanted everyone to take away tonight is beurre blanc doesn't have to be complicated or difficult. You just need to understand what an emulsion is. You make sure the temperature is not too hot. You keep it moving while the butter's going into it or while the smart balance or whatever other butter flavored fat you're adding to it. And you should be fine. Now, keep in mind when you look at the ingredients in the classic version, cream is also an emulsifier. So, I mean, this particular cream has 36% butter fat. So you've got a stick of butter, you've got cream, which is 36% butter, and then this little bit of wine and some minced shallots. So that liquid is reduced with the cream, which is reduced, and then you throw in the fat. So if you reduce cream with the white wine or the liquid of choice and the shallots, you cannot help but make sure that this emulsifies. It's a real good stabilizer as well. It's just, again, not obviously that healthy for you. So there's different things. You could also even use a little bit of slurry if you ever have an issue with your sauces breaking. So you could use a slurry to stabilize it. Just a couple drops would be all it would take.
That is a great tip. I can't tell you how many times I've ended up with a separated sauce, and your calmness is very inspirational.
Yeah, I think Jack, it is the hardest sauce to make next to hollandaise.
So people are curious about the Thai chili sauce. Was it Thai chili sauce?
Yeah,
and they want to know how much, and somebody's asking for a close-up of the bottle.
Yeah, this is the brand that you see a lot here in Hawaii, May Ploy, but there's a lot of them now. I think Kikkoman's makes one, Lee Kum Kee makes one. So you can find the sweet Thai chili sauce. But honestly, I have a bunch of variations that I was going to bring out and talk about options for the sauces you could use to mount butter in. Any of them would work. The only thing I would say to keep in mind is if you were using something like hoisin or oyster sauce or a marinade or a stir fry sauce or something out of a bottle or a pre-made one that's really on the thick side, probably going to want to dilute it a little bit with some water. Because remember, water is really important. Even though fat and water don't mix, we're making them mix through the technique we're using. And if you have a sauce that's already thick to begin with, and then you try to put the fat into it, there might not be enough water to stabilize it.
These are great tips. We are out of time, so instead of going back to my share slide, I wonder, Dan, could you just talk for 30 seconds about cooking in paper, which you're going to be demonstrating next week?
Oh, yeah, in papillote. So next week is, we just finished a series or the classes through June, and one of the techniques that we wanted to highlight was in papillote, or in paper, a French term. It's not used a lot these days, but it's super convenient and it is really healthy. So basically what we're doing is taking a sheet of parchment paper, adding all of our ingredients inside, folding it up and sealing it, and then we bake it in the oven and it comes out a little puffy. You can also use aluminum foil. I remember Alan Wong's used to sell the clams or mussels in aluminum foil. When it bakes, it puffs up like, Jiffy Pop, if any of you remember the Jiffy Pop. And then you tear it open at the table and all the steam and the aroma comes out and then everybody kind of digs into the clams. So
that sounds really fun. So I hope you'll all join us next week. And I do want to mention prizes today because most of you did not sign in with your name. And so if you want to be eligible for a door prize, please sign in with your first and last name. If I do 3 drawings and I don't get a person that has a real name, I'm giving up because it's too hard for me to search and moderate questions. So if you folks are interested in the door prizes, which is the Fast, Healthy, and Ono seasonings, please be sure to sign in with both your first and your last name, or at least a name, not an initial, and not AARP. So that's my plug for that. We look forward to seeing all of you next week if we can. And thank you, Chef Dan. I'm going to rewatch this when I am done with this, because this is something that I've been wanting to learn for a very long time. So mahalo.
Aloha.
Thanks, everybody.